Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel Greenberg. I'm the founder of Winter Ion Game Studio, the Aegis, or Academic Excellence in Games and Interactive Storytelling. I'm also a graduate lecturer here at George Mason University in game history and design. Creativity and forward thinking are hallmarks of this morning's guest. A self-described serial entrepreneur, he has founded numerous business ventures, including Brainrush, Catalyst Technologies, Chuck E. Cheese, and of course, Atari, where he employed a number of great creative people. His 2013 book, Finding the Next Steve Jobs, details his decades of experience and advice in finding that talent and creating the environment to drive growth and innovation. We are all very excited he's chosen to serve as our first game pioneer in residence here at Mason's VSGI. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to introduce Mr. Nolan Bushnell.
Well, it's great to be here. I even see an Atari t-shirt. Good on you. Anyway, I think that context is always valuable whenever we talk about something. So I want to talk a little bit about how this crazy stuff happened. And it really started, in some ways, at Lagoon. I had a summer job, putting myself through college, working as a carny. And it was my job to induce customers, fun seekers, to spend a quarter, to throw balls at milk bottles, to do various things. And I realize, in retrospect, that that's sort of what I did in the early days. I basically induced people to put quarters in my machines. Yep, these are the kinds of things we had. But a little bit before that, a guy named Willie Higginbotham, I had no idea who he was or this, I just figured this out later, created what we believe was the very first video game. And it was on an oscilloscope, resistors and capacitors, and he made a little game that was a ping pong game. Then we fast forward to this guy. This guy was Dr. Evans, and he thought it was a revolutionary idea that he could connect computers to displays. And that, what he's playing with right there, is the very, very first graphic processor. The reason and each one of those cards represented 2 flip-flops. We've come a long way, baby. This is a PDP-1. PDP-1 was remarkable because of that screen in the middle. Now that screen was actually an adaptation of a display for, Second World War. It was radar. It was a radar display, XY. The tube is about this long, electrostatic deflection. But this represents the first commercial computer that had a video display. The guys at MIT decided that they'd make a game. And it was called Space War. It was done by a guy named Steve Russell, smart guy. And of course, this computer had the blistering clock speed of 100 kilohertz. So, of course, you could do a whole bunch with it. But he created that. Enter Nolan Bushnell. I fell in love with the game. I thought it was so cool. And concurrently, I had been promoted to manager of the whole games department, and I had 2 arcades reporting to me. And so I knew the cost of coin-operated games. I knew how much coin-operated games needed to earn. And I thought to myself, wow, I've been playing this game at the university. I said, wow, if I could put one of these screens and put a coin slot on it, it'd make a lot of money. And then you divide 25 cents every 3 minutes into $1 million computer, and the math doesn't work. So I put that on hold, graduated, moved to California, and across my desk came a computer for $4,000. Now, the video displays cost $25,000, so I knew that if I could take that $4,000 computer and put regular TV sets to them, that I may be able to get down to the $1,000 a coin slot, which was sort of the mathematics at the time. It was not to be. Even though the computer that I had, that I discovered, had a blistering clock speed of 800 kilohertz, it just couldn't do it fast enough. But in the process of figuring out, I started making these little circuits, these little digital signal generators to offload things like score and the star field and that off of the computer. And when I decided I had to abandon it, that it just didn't work, all of a sudden, I had the epiphany. And we all have epiphanies along the way, and some are good and some are bad. But this one, I said, I'm going to do it all in hardware. So the early video games were not von Neumann architecture at all. There was no software. It was all hardware. It was a digital signal generator, single purpose, made to play a single game. And as we say, the rest is history. It made the cost really cheap, said we could build them, ship them, and the first game was Computer Space, and I sold it, I licensed it to a company that did Computer Quiz. There wasn't a computer in that, incidentally. It was a slide projector. That was the technology at the time. And I modeled that unit out of modeling clay on my kitchen table, had it blown up by a guy who made fiberglass swimming pools and boats, and all of a sudden he was in the cabinet for computer business. The model, standing next to it, was a topless dancer at a local bar. That's a whole nother story. We were off to the races. Well, we tested Computer Space next to a place called the Dutch Goose that was next to Stanford University in California. And it was a false positive. They loved it. It was incredible. All my friends loved it. All my friends were engineers. But if you put a Computer Space in a working man's bar, it earned no money because it was confusing. Because, we thought it was cool. Yeah, of course you have to turn the rocket ship around and retro thrust in order to slow it down. If you didn't know, Newton's second law, you were totally lost. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people in the world that don't know anything about Newton's second law. But anyway, I digress. So we decided to do another one, and this game was a total takeoff, but it was an accident. I saw it as a training system for the guy in the beard, Al Alcorn. He's the actual guy who did Pong. there's actually two big innovations here. One is the polka dot shirt, which did not catch on. And the other one was Pong. And that was my partner on the left, and the other guy in the glasses, that was my CFO, and I fired him for some funny reasons. We won't go into that. Anyway. Then Magnavox came along with their analog game for the home in '72. And then we did digital Pong in '75. Huge success. Brought the game to millions of homes. And then we did the Atari VCS, known as the Atari. And the game changed. All of a sudden, the video game business became a billion-dollar business. Coin-operated games at that time, coin-operated video games, which were the staple, reached about $350 million. Now understand, these were in 1970 dollars. And so if you take in inflation and various things, the coin-op business at that time was about $1.4 billion, $1.5 billion. Not bad. But the consumer business, of course, I never thought that video games would be bigger than the movie business. But now they're almost twice. Isn't that cool? That's so this is kind of a series. Asteroids was actually the first video game that used a microprocessor. A little data point for you. Do you know that ever played Centipedes? That was the first game that was developed primarily by a woman. Donna Bailey. She was cute. But anyway, that had nothing to do with her technical skills. I threw that in. See now, my wife would yell at me for saying something like that. So, 1983, they call it the bubble year because Atari totally screwed the world up. I'd left, so it's not on my head, so I can really whack them. But they thought they could sell, I sold the company to Warner in '76, and they thought that they'd bought a record company. They had all the record executives. And so they didn't see themselves in the record player business. And so they didn't upgrade the tech. Imagine a game that was designed in 1976, 1975, having relevance 8 years later. Of course it wasn't going to be any good. The Atari 2600 had 128 bytes of memory. Not kilobytes, bytes. Now, that's because memory was very expensive. In 3 years, the cost of memory had dropped 2 orders of magnitude. So just the ability to have one line of video in memory before you had to put it out on the screen changed the software. The software had to compute not just what was on the line, it had to compute the sync pulses, the refresh, all that. I mean, it was so hard to program that I'm surprised anybody could do it. And of course, you've heard the E.T. story. E.T. was a disaster the minute the contract with Spielberg was signed. First of all, it was signed in August. Second, it was way too much money. And third, it was okay to have a brand that was reasonably good. But in those days, it took almost 6 months to do a reasonable cartridge and 9 months to do a really good one. So they thought, well, if I give this guy a big bonus, he can do it in 3. Well, he couldn't. It was a bad game. But more than that, they had to sell so many of them. And sometimes these guys get really crazy and they think, well, you know, we're going to sell so many of them. And they actually built more ET cartridges than they were players. That is really dumb. And when asked, why did you build so many? They said, well, maybe somebody would want to have one at their cabin. You mean they're going to have an extra cartridge, but not an extra player? This doesn't work. Anyway, these are some of the other games that Atari did. Touch Me down at the bottom. You know it as Simon. We did it in the coin-op version, and a guy we noticed was playing the game, the same guy that did the Magnavox Odyssey, and he said, I can turn this into a consumer game. Sold it to Hasbro. And, you know, it's one that got away. We invented it. We liked the game. We didn't see it as a consumer product. Our mistake. I did Microwave and ETAC. And then later on, I did a company called Uwink, which was a ordering system, bar, restaurant, games you could play. It was really fun. Buy a beer, hamburger, various things. And today, there's all kinds of fun stuff going on. I'm working on a company called Brain Rush, uses games to teach, and they're really pretty successful. This is one where you learn the elements, water cycles, and what have you. Got a company called Anti-Aging Games. See, as I get older, I want to get old, but I don't want to get dumb. And so it turns out that you can do a whole bunch of wonderful things to keep your brains really fresh and really fun. Educational games are a significant area right now, and it's getting bigger. More and more schools are starting to adopt tablets, Chromebooks into their systems. And there's actually getting to be some budgets freed up. The other thing I'm working on, I've got a treadmill that is made for desks. It's short, it's wide, and it's silent. And did you know that when you are solving a problem, you like to pace? When I'm giving a speech, I like to pace. And what you're doing is you're self-medicating. You're creating extra blood flow into your brain. And when you're walking, you're smarter than when you're sitting. They say sitting is the new smoking. That if you don't get up and wander around a little bit, you're not optimizing your mental capability. So sitting in the basement playing Counter-Strike for 4 hours at a thing is not a good idea, no matter how much cola and coffee you drink. But the other part about it is that active minds and active bodies, they've been able to increase the outcomes of high schools just by having a good PE program. And of course, this is where games come in, and I believe that there's going to be a big opportunity for games, particularly as we get body tracking better and better. We all know how Dance Dance Revolution, you know, you can get really tired doing that one. And I don't know if you've ever played Let's Dance. The best party you can ever have is have a lot of alcohol and just dance. I can tell you right now that I have, personally, the definitive version of Flashdance. Hard to believe, but it's pretty cool. Anyway, Connect Sports, and physical gaming is an area that is emerging. And I think that those of you who are in the game program, you want to try to get out of the box to the extent that you can. And there are some areas which are really good in a small way. And starting a business in a small area is actually easier than sometimes trying to go it with the big boys. Augmented reality is getting to be huge. We all know these kinds of things. Do you know one that's called Cast AR? This is an interesting technology in which you actually have projectors on your glasses that hit a retroreflective screen on the table, and the effect is phenomenal. I believe that they're going to take over the board game business. And I think that board games have something that are really important in that they're so social. You know, my kids are playing a lot of German board games. You know, they started out sort of with Settlers Catan, and now one of my sons has a $100 a month subscription to a board game thing where he gets 2 or 3 every week or every month. You know, I hate to learn all those new rules. But he brings them to our Sunday dinner, and they're just incredible. But with this particular one, you can actually have physical objects intermixed with the other objects. There's also a class of game that is known as having a hidden personal perspective and a public perspective. A lot of card games have a hidden personal perspective. I mean, you have cards that no one else can see. And part of the dynamic is for you to be able to play unknown things. You've got a secret. And a secret is something that is always an element of social gameplay. This is another one. This is the same tech. And I put this up instead of the HoloLens because these glasses can be built for about $100. The HoloLens right now, they believe, my guys say that their bill of materials right now is over $3,000. And so, you know, I just don't believe that's a consumer product. Then, of course, we just have augmented reality. My wife hates this slide, too. She says that it's really not a good place. It's slutty ex-girlfriend shaming. I don't know. Here we've got crazy ex-girlfriend. I mean, these are probably done by some guy. If you really want to look like a geek, this is an interesting area. You know, I get a kick out of this one. Do you really want to read a newspaper anymore? I mean, the biggest problem with today's technology and the Kindle and you know, all the online news is that you have nothing to line the birdcage with. But it's, I mean, I don't know if I were in the newspaper business, I don't know when I would if I'd ever upgrade the presses again. I think they're gone, actually. I think QR codes are gone. Why? QR codes are really cool in a sparse computer environment. Today, all you have to do is choose any look and the computers can recognize it. Fiducial's sort of the same way. We live in an abundance of computer technology, computer flops, and visual recognition is getting to be so standard and so trivial that I don't think we have to play with these things anymore. Though it does make things faster. And latency is an issue. Oh, this is an interesting display technology I saw the other day. It looks like that, and you push the button, and it actually scans so that you have this scan. The thing is, you can't tell, but it's just slightly bigger than a pencil. The thing on top, that's a full screen. It's flexible. It's coming out of China right now. And that whole screen costs about $15. So you'll be able to have any kind of a screen. Of course, with your phone now, do you really need that? It's confusing. You've all heard of Magic Leap, where all of a sudden it is going to direct images right onto your retina. And they claim without pixels. Now that's confusing to me, because we know that our eyes, by their nature, have rods and cones. Those are pixels. So you can't get less than that. So I don't know. They got cool technology. I think they've raised too much money. One of the things that happens when you raise too much money is you set expectations that are so high that it's very hard to deliver on them. As a result, they will continue to not be able to ship because they've raised so much money that they can't disappoint. And I think while they're doing some great tech, I'm not sure how successful they're going to be. I think they've painted themselves into a box, but we'll see. Just a prediction. I think public spaces are a great space to think about. One of my sons has Versix, and he makes big games for public spaces. Laser maze, where you actually have to physically go through it. It goes through, he has a couple of things in the Great Wolf Lodge. Anybody ever been to a Great Wolf Lodge, big thing? Isn't that fun? But it's a new kind of an immersive environment where you move from room to room. So it's a little bit like, anybody done a room escape? I've done about 12 of them, and they're really fun. And I think that right now there hasn't been enough tech inserted. Most of the room escapes tend to focus a little too much on paper and padlocks and things like that. And I think that there's a lot of tech that can be going there. Typical room escape in Los Angeles is making somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 a month in a space that's rented for $300 or $400. So interesting economics for room escapes, and I think that's going to be a growing phenomenon. There's a thing called the void, and that's virtual reality. Virtual reality matched with a physical location, so that you're in a VR headset, you're walking through a world that's just a dark warehouse, but you go up and you see a fireplace, and they have a radiant heater. So as you go by, you can actually feel the heat. Or you walk past a waterfall, And they've got misters, and you can feel the spray off of the waterfall. And then, of course, you go around the corner, and there's a monster who's a zombie. He's been dead for some time. And they were trying to find the right smell. Does anybody know what a zombie should smell like? I think rotten flesh, don't you think, probably?
I've heard rotting potato smells like rotten flesh.
What?
I've heard rotting potato smells like rotting flesh.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, good fun. I mean, don't you want to do that? Then, of course, there's Sleep No More in New York. Anybody been there? Pretty fun. It's a 100,000 square foot warehouse that's been turned into a hotel. It's not really a game, but it should be. So I would suggest that you think about doing something like that and having some fun with it. Oh, I did the Void. The Future Group in Norway matches Unity and the Unreal Engine into real-life green screen in real time. You start seeing game shows and constructs being done for movies and television, and really I'm on the board of this company, and they do some amazing stuff. Go into thefuturegroup.com out of Norway, and you'll see some good stuff. Anybody heard of the Moment Factory? Moment Factory is a Montreal company. It's kind of the spawn of Cirque du Soleil, and they have been doing some massive installations of really cool stuff. They do probably one out of 3 rock concerts in terms of the special effects. And they've done a park in Montreal that lights up at night and interacts with the people as it moves through. And if you get a chance to go up and see it, it's probably getting close to being closed. It gets cold in Montreal. It's cold here too. But the whole park comes alive with live trees and interesting environments. And they're game-like experiences. And I think that what I want you all to do in the game field is to expand your horizons. Because we all know that games are good on the computer, and they're good on the cell phone. But I think our whole world is an opportunity for us to be a palette. Thing called Furies of Bruta, which sort of does the same thing. Then She Fell. It's another immersive thing. George R.R. Martin, the guy who wrote Game of Thrones, bought a bowling alley in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Turned loose a whole bunch of artists, and they created Meow Wolf. Go look it up in the web, and it's incredible. It's a art installation game construct that you can climb through, climb on top of, and it's massive, and it's really weird. Can you imagine walking through this? There you think you're in some kind of a cosmic outer space time tunnel. These are public space games that are getting to be really interesting. Now let's talk a little bit about our favorites, the mobile space. It's okay to copy and modify. A lot of the games that we play today are old favorites retrashed, imagined. I mean, how many have played Crossy Road? Yeah. It's Frogger, you know? But it's fun. You know, I hate the fast trains, but no, actually, the fast trains aren't as bad as when you get one of the setups that have like 5 or 6 log rivers going. They're confusing. This is I just have to throw this in because this is geek for hours. This is one of the very first GPS-aware physical augmented reality systems. I don't think he could get a date wearing that. But he could if he'd invented Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is like one of these crazy things in which all the stars align. It's a perfect storm. It had a collectible construct that everybody knew. And then you added to it the geolocationing, and it's pretty fun. And it caught on unlike anything that I've seen for a long time. I live in Southern California next to Santa Monica. The Santa Monica Pier at 3 in the morning had 20,000 people catching Pokemons. And they were having fun, and they were, you know, the Santa Monica Pier evidently, and I don't know this because I wasn't one of them, there were water Pokemons there that were really important and hard to get. But people were meeting people, having fun because of Pokemon Go. But last week, there was almost no one there. Been there, seen it, done it. Which is a principle for games that I really want you to understand, that there is a half-life to every game. And the half-life means that you will always get bored with a game, but not necessarily the people. For example, chess has been around for, what, 1,000 years? 800? It's not because of the game, it's because of the people and because of the construct. Go has been around for at least 3,000 years, and I still play it, and it's still my favorite game. But in general, our games are fleeting. And you should always try to plan on that. And it's okay for a strategy to expect things to go up and then go down. So, if I ask you, now look deep down in your heart, if you're doing video games, why? Do you want to be rich? Or do you want to have fun? Or do you want to design a game you've always wanted to play? If you want to be rich, the video game business is a tough place right now. It's a very, very red ocean. If you do an iPhone app, you're just one of 500,000. How do you stand out? So here's a piece of advice. If you're designing a game, how do you start? Do you start with a spec? No. What do you start with? You go in and you simulate the presentation that you would have to make on the Apple App Store. What can you say, and what is the image on the App Store that is going to help you stand out? Then you say, what can I say on Twitter, on Facebook, that will be interesting for my game? Start from the marketing side. Really get that understood. And the marketing side should inform the game design rather than the game design informing the marketing side. Because the marketing will be more important to the success of the game than the game itself. There are so many great games out there that nobody knows about and just languish, and they're great. So, let's move on to some of the crazy stuff. We all would like to design Call of Duty, but that's a team. And a lot of people, these massive budgets. And once you get a game, you learn about what you're doing. This is a very acceptable career path. There's probably 200 people, 300 people involved in each version of Call of Duty or Counter-Strike or some of the big games. Madden. If you like sports, being part of the team that does Madden 249 is going to be okay. It's a pathway. Oh, but let me give you guys an idea. This was Atari football, circa 1976, 77. It was one of the most successful games that Atari did in terms of gameplay. This was a game that the cabinet fell apart because of so much play. And it was one player against another. And it was X's and O's football. I mean, we spent a lot of money on those graphics. But there's an interesting thing about games. Sometimes graphics are our enemy. And that if you want to play chess with a master, you can only play with black and white wood-carved pieces of a particular type, because they want to remove all the ambiguity. We've all played a game, with some hoo-ha set of pieces where the bishops look like pawns and the pawns look like bishops, and you can't tell the king from the queen. You want to get rid of that. So the thing about X's and O's is that it's unambiguous. You know exactly what's going on. And I believe that there is a place for a mobile and or a tablet X's and O's football that would be more fun than Madden. And one that you can play like with Chess with Friends or Words with Friends, where you can play offense and defense against a person over the net. There will be one created in the next 2 or 3 years. And I want it. And if not by you guys, I'm going to do it. I'm actually doing one that is blocks. Now, blocks is actually known as the same game. It's the game where if there are more than one blocks, you can touch them and they go away and then they fall down and you want to clean the board. It's one of the 20 basic game types that we have chronicled. Swap 3 is probably the monster. It's probably got more people playing mobile games than anything else. And it's Candy Crush. Candy Crush monetized it massively, and they were able to create an economic model around Candy Crush. And at its peak, it was earning $2 million a day, $3 million a day. And the company, because of that one game, sold for what, $5.6 billion? That's kind of a home run. You can do a lot of fun things with $5.8 billion or three. So, what's my strategy here? I knew, remember the half-life, I knew that people who had been playing Candy Crush for $2 million a day were going to get tired of it. So I wanted to create a game that could catch those people. And so I've taken same game, I've modified it, I've created 200 levels, and it's going to be out this fall. And it's aimed strictly at the Candy Crush model, and we're going to go after those with hammer and tong. And it's a strategy. It's a saga game. And saga games, the essence of them is to take a game metric and modify it till the cows come home. Modify it, but you have to figure out a way to delicately monetize. Now let's think about how we want to monetize. There's free-to-play, pay-to-win. That really irritates everybody, and it worked for a little while, but it's not that great. The best ones tend to deal with people's impatience. You know, if I pay a little bit of money, I get to pay longer. So every day you get 5 lives or 3 lives or a life. And once it's gone, you can't play again unless you pay. That tends to be the most successful metric today. There is another one where, and it's just starting, and some people have gotten it pretty good and some people haven't. And that's where there is a random generated level, some of which are really hard. Some would say impossible to beat without special power-ups or special tools. We're actually going to be using that method a little bit with our same game, where if you have enough tools, you can complete that level and go from level 74 to 75. And there's something about this completeness, about this journey, that is intellectually satisfying to people. Yes, I'm now on level 76, and then you can tweet about it and you can talk to your friends, and they'll say, oh, I'm only at 72. And so then they try to compete with each other. So I think that's an area that you need to think about. Think about a game construct in mobile, a simple one, and then think about how do I turn it into a saga game. Those have tended to be abnormally successful. So give that a go. Of course, Minecraft is incredibly powerful. And there are Minecraft kinds of games in which you do some pre-setups. Like Minecraft on a really small screen is not that satisfying. But there's some Minecraft elements that I think have some opportunities on a small screen. You can play Minecraft on a tablet pretty well, but on a small on a small screen phone, not so. I think there's an opportunity there if you can figure out a good Minecraft construct for a cell phone. Here's an area that I think is going to be big. Who knows what this is? This is a sequel to Device 6, same company, who did a thing called Seas. Oh God, I forgot it. Anyway, Room. Anybody played The Room? What's that? Am I going too fast? Yeah. Anyway, The Room, it's gorgeous. That game right there earned somewhere between 7 and 8 million downloads at $2 a whack. Pretty successful. And of course, then they did The Room 2. But look at the level of the artwork they had. This was an art-driven game. Expensive. I think they had a couple $1 million into it. But it paid off for them. So it's one pathway. And I've often wondered whether The Room, Room Escapes, all that area where you're solving puzzles, tapped into some kind of a intellectual model for the way people think and like. Physical activity games, I keep going back to that because I feel like the physicality of games, that there can be a lot more done with tech on these things. Remember how Twister was? This is a very, very successful game by Milton Bradley. And now we do this, there's a button wall that, you know, you have to hit 3 at the same time. Now you have to get your knees in it. How do you do 4 in a row, 4 at the same time? This game was built by one of my sons, and it's the highlight. He puts these in conferences and various places, and it's extremely successful. And it's simply a technical adaptation of Twister horizontally instead of vertically, or vertically instead of horizontally. I keep telling him, I said, you got to do one horizontally. He says, I don't know. That might be a little bit raw for a conference. Boy, you can't hardly see that. Have you played inside? Isn't that creepy? I love it. I mean, this is art that's almost not there. You know, it's interesting. Limbo, played that one? You know, it's an art style that was very surprising to me. You know, is that hard to do, this kind of art? Not too, isn't it? But it's it puts you into a different world that is really quite extraordinary. I'm just kind of pointing out some successes that I've seen, just to kind of tweak where you're going. One of my favorite games, Portal, doesn't do well on a tablet or a cell phone. And I believe that if you really put your gray cells to work on it, figure out a way to do a Portal using the accelerometers and the gyros on a cell phone, so that in order to go through various places, you have to create this, then you can go through. I feel like there's something there. Haven't quite figured out how to do it. But if you do, I believe there's a high probability that you can catch the people who love Portal and a mobile platform. And this wouldn't be a free-to-player. This would be one where you would promote it as a Portal type game for the cell phone, and you'd put $2 on it, and I think you'd make a lot of money. Anyway, gestures, haptics, One of the big areas that VR is struggling with right now is haptics. How do you get feedback to the physical world? Do you know what this guy's doing? He's doing surgery. And these units actually give him physical feedback when he cuts something. This was developed by DARPA so that they could actually do surgery with the surgeon being in behind the lines and the field hospitals being right up close. This is tech gaming thing. I've got one of these, and I don't know how to use it. But then there's all kinds of, I knew the minute somebody decided to call the people who wore these glass holes, that these were, that this was gone. But I think that have you seen the GoPro glasses just recently released? They basically have GoPro glasses that can record everything, and they're stylish and cool, and they're sunglasses, and they might be successful. I've got a company that's doing some things for hearing aids, hearing assisted, so that you can have a hearing aid that has shotgun mics on the limbs of the glasses so that you can get a 20 dB boost in the sound for whoever you're looking at, which is really good in situations like noisy restaurants and what have you. Right now, when I wear the prototypes, I look like that guy with the helmet and the GPS thing on there. But, it's fun to start things. They say, what are those glasses? And I said, well, they're prototypes. And then they ask some more. And one of the coolest things about them, it has a what button. And it basically records everything that it hears. And so instead of saying what, if you didn't, you just tap it twice and it reverses and tells you what you heard 10 seconds or 15 seconds before. Weird stuff. These are private screens. These are heads-up displays. This is an interesting device that actually gives you, it's got a couple of gyros in there so that it gives you the feeling of some kind of feedback. They're relatively cheap, and I think that it should be integrated better into some games, but there's an interesting technology there that I think you should look at. We're going to be announcing mobile VR, and we got full body tracking, hand gestures, and we can set up in 15 minutes. We can put 10 people in the same physical construct, and we can cover a space larger than a football field. And we can track you to within 5 centimeters. Latency, less than 10 milliseconds. So, what are we going to do with it? You got it. We're going to do laser tag. Not only that, you can become a superhero. Last week, I was standing on top of a skyscraper throwing plasma balls. Throwing plasma balls at my opponent, who was standing on another skyscraper, throwing back lightning bolts at me. That really made me irritated. When I got out of that game, I was sweating like a pig. I've never been having to, because you have, when somebody's throwing lightning bolts at you, you've got to get out of the way. But you can also do this, which puts up a shield. But But when you're doing this, all you're doing is, it's just defense, and that's no fun. So you do this, and then you run to the side, and you throw some plasma balls back in the other direction. And then, of course, if you get too carried away, you fall off the building, which is not fun. But that's fun. But that's just part of it. We're building a VR headset into a football helmet. And we are now in discussion with one of the major NFL teams in which we're going to create VR practice sessions, so that one of the things about football is situational awareness, and you can train for that. And so we can record what the visual presentation is for every one of the VR people, as well as the overview. So the coach can go and say, see this guy coming from over here, and we can program in the offense, or if you're on the offense, we can program in the defense of the likely way that the opponent is going to play. Now, one of the problems is when you hit them, it does, you can't feel it. But we've also been working with Fort Irwin, and who is the training center, so that we can actually create synthetic Afghani villages and go in and train people. Homeland Security, police departments have big budgets right now for training, because there's an awful lot of snap decisions that need to be made in law enforcement, and they want to train better. And so I think VR is going to be pretty fun for that. Economic models, analytics. There are a lot of ways that you can be successful. And analytics are something that you cannot be unaware of. Today, if you're working for Google and you have an idea, you're not allowed to say, I think. You say, what? Can't say I think. No. You have to go in and say, the data shows that. So if you have an idea, you have to look at what the data shows you about that idea and present the idea in the construct of analytics. Today, when you play a game, you need to be able to capture almost every touch. And when people touch the wrong place, you need to know that. And that is a characteristic of a bad game design. And a lot of times, just getting rid of those false touches makes the play significantly more appealing, more fun. How am I doing on time? I just realized. I'm probably getting over.
Yeah, another 15 minutes and then maybe questions.
Okay. So focus on analytics. Learn what your people are doing with your games. Publish early and get analytical data of part of it. Like if you're planning a game experience to be, half hour, 45 minutes, and a couple of hours, publish the first 10 minutes of it and see how people are playing with it. Let people get a hold of it, then analyze their actives. This will save you an awful lot of money. Who knows who this guy is? There are all kinds of ways to make money on games. This guy last year did what, 14 million bucks? Really an interesting thing where just being a personality that plays games trash talks them, but now he's a tool for you. Can you get him to talk about your game? The difference between him talking about a game and him not talking about a game is about 1 million downloads. Pretty cool. So be nice to him. Who knows who this guy is? That's Captain Sparkles. He plays Minecraft games, and quite well. I think last year he did, what, $8 million in promotional and ad revenue? That's just on one game. It's a good game, but Captain Sparkles is doing very well. So if you have a Minecraft-like thing, you've got to get to know Captain Sparkles. And there are about 20 others. And some of them are easier, some of them are harder to get involved with. But these are the things that you have to figure out how to resonate with the marketing community of social media, what have you. So what I want to emphasize is become holistic about your game design. Don't be focusing just on the game or just on the gameplay. You've got to think about how it fits into the marketplace. You've got to think about how it fits into what's going on in the world. Who knows what this is? This is called a campus party. And for 300 euros, you get 5 days of uninterrupted gaming. For 300 euros, you get a chair and a table and a 50 gigabit fiber connection. And a pup tent. And I've been to several of these, and they are incredible. You take a whole convention facility. One room is this. I mean, look at that. You bring your own computer, your stuff, and you game until you drop. And then you go and you climb into your pup tent. This is actually one where you bring your own pup tent. What they're doing now is all the pup tents are the same, and you get to take the pup tent home with you. There's also, in the corner, a bale of cup and noodle. On the other wall, there's a bank of microwave ovens with all kinds of weird stuff, including popcorn. All for 300 euros. What a deal. Anyway, those are places that you can get a whole bunch of gamers in a really good way. Another game that I'm working on with my youngest son is a game called Reigns. Now, Reigns is done about, 8 million downloads so far. It's massively successful. And the art is really pedestrian. So we're doing one on a startup. So instead of being king, you're the head of a startup. And your CTO comes and asks you questions, and your marketing guy and various things. And so that'll be out hopefully just after Christmas. And basically, we're copying a concept, a construct that has been successful in saying, okay, if you want to be king, great. Some people don't want to be king. They'd rather be a startup entrepreneur. What's this? I have another son that is building an Echo game. Echo is maybe the best voice recognition system that I have ever seen. It's got voice recognition at a distance, which I thought was going to be a lot longer. And it's so good, it can hear me across the room and answer my questions. But there aren't really any good games for it. And so we're going to fix that. And the neat thing about Amazon is that when we first looked at it, we said, but there's no app store. But there is an app store. With Amazon, when the key word for the Echo is Alexa. You say, Alexa, send me the game of Werewolf. You ever played Werewolf? Or Mafia? You go to dinner and you kill each other off. It's not very social. But I think that in the next couple of years, there will be a series of Echo games that will be for parties, for people having fun, that are basically voice operated. They publish the API for it. And you as game designers should climb onto that. November, Google is going to come with theirs. Their APIs are generally very, very good. And instead of saying Alexa, you'll have to say, okay, Google. And it looks like Apple is going to be doing one as well. So the voice-operated infrastructure is real, it's growing, and it's just the beginning. And so instead of climbing into a red ocean, find the blue ocean of the Amazon world. And I think you might be surprised about how successful you can be. I just realized I had my slides out of order. But Device 6 is a game construct that blurs the distinction between a narrative and a game. And I believe that by putting together a little bit of gameplay and a lot of narrative, that there's some chances. Device 6 was a hugely successful game. And where you're basically turning your screen around, for those of you who haven't played it, turn your screen around and read the narrative, so that if you're going down a hall and you turn to the right, you have to turn the whole screen. And it's interesting how you match the physical world and the written word. And I believe that it's an area that is constantly able to refresh. And what I would like to be able to do, there's a wonderful, massively ubiquitous world out there of the Kindle. Now, think about doing this kind of a game, but publishing it on Kindle. That could be very, very successful. You can figure out how to do it the right way. And then, of course, there's Clash of Clans. Here's a $3 to $4 million a day franchise. I played it for a while. I got tired of it. And I think that people are going to be getting increasingly tired. So I wanted to build a game that will catch those people. And one of my favorite games, anybody ever play Advanced Wars on the old DS? I'm going to upgrade that for mobile, trying to aim at the people who are tired, who have hit the half-life of Clash of Clans. And now we are going to be able to play Advance Wars New. I'd show you some of the graphics on it because they're so cool. But now you're going to be able to play it asynchronously with your friends, like Chester's friends and what have you. When you can create a competition like that, it helps it become viral. Because I will challenge you to play me a game, and if you haven't downloaded it, you download it, and then you get going. This will be a free-to-play, and then we've got some tricky ways to get money out of you at a later time. Candy Crush, I told you about that with the same game. Here's another one that I think you should work on. Hacky sack using cell phones. Huh? And what you need to be able to do is figure out a way. Right now, if you're standing around in a circle, it takes way too long to synchronize. And I believe there's some tricks that we can do because the packets of information between the players can be very small. So this is a little bit of a technological hack more than a game hack. But if hacky sack can be fun, hacky sack on cell phones is a good one. So there's another free one for you. Incidentally, if you guys get really successful on any of those, you have to give me a piece. Not a big piece, just, or maybe you just have to say attaboy. And that's kind of it for today. If there's any questions, I've kind of covered a lot of stuff in a random and disjointed fashion, but I feel like the games that we have and the opportunities that we have are extraordinary. And I applaud your decision to come here and listen to my drivel. No. No, to being in the game business, because I can assure you that the game business, it's always new. That we're always reinventing ourselves. And I believe that that's the source. Some people think it's a frustration, but I actually think it's a source of happiness because we've always got new horizons and new skills that we need. Like, I never feel like I have enough skills. I've been recently learning how to reprogram an Arduino and a Raspberry Pi. You know, the last computer language that I was really good at was Pascal. You guys probably don't even know what that is. It was so old. The first program language I learned was Gotran, which was a precursor to Fortran. I mean, you know, that's how old I am. It's really frightening. But like you say, getting older is, you know, you have to witch for it because the alternative is unacceptable. Anyway, questions? Yes. Yes. You got to talk really loud because I'm old and deaf.
So earlier you mentioned that people go into the game design business for 3 reasons. You only really elaborated on the first one. Could you elaborate on the other 2?
Yeah. I think that a lot of times making money, one, building a game that you want to play. I think in some cases, building a game that you want to play may lead to number 1, better than just going in to try to make money. The third one, for your ego, the worst thing you can have is an ego that is misplaced. It is the most expensive thing that you can ever have. If you have an ego, you always have to spend too much money on clothes or cars or various things. What you want to do is be centered, be happy with yourself, but constantly pushing yourself to be better. And those 3 things, I think that the game business, and I probably should have added a 4th one. I think games are going to be the future of education, and that many, I'd say as much as a third of the school population are being unserved by classrooms, and that we can pull results out of kids much better with game constructs as opposed to classroom constructs. I've been working with the Nevada prison system with brain rush. And some of the prisoners that are, and we're working with guys that are just about to be paroled, guys and girls. There's some tough women in there too. And most of them didn't have a third grade education. And they've said to me that school was a failure for them. It was baffling that they just didn't get it. They couldn't read. They couldn't calculate. And then when they were given these games, all of a sudden it was like a light went on. They said, I grew up thinking I was stupid. And they're in fact not stupid. They just learn in a different way. And it wasn't being served by the schools that they were in. And so I think that we can fix the world. There's a huge problem between the skills that are needed by society and the skills that are available. And the problem is the permanent underclass, undereducated, underskilled, unemployed. And I believe that's fixable. But I think games will be the fixer. And so if you really want to do good things for the world, educational games, I think, are a very important threat as a fourth reason to be in the game business. Does that kind of answer your question roundabout? Another? Yeah.
So I guess what I was wondering, if you were recreating either an activity or a game, what is, I guess, a wow factor that is viable enough to try and bring in an audience, that to change it from its original activity or game?
Try that on me again.
So when you're recreating something, what is enough of a change to warrant making it again? If, for instance, you're making Candy Crush again, what's enough to make it stand out from the original in a way that people will actually want to pursue it?
There's a couple of answers to that. There are some games that are great the way they are, and they've just been improperly marketed. I have a friend who has a very successful business, and he doesn't do anything. He goes to a game that he likes that's not doing well and says, I'd like to market your game, and I'll give you 20% of the money that I make. He gets the source code, renames it, republishes it, and puts marketing around it, and makes money. He hasn't written a line. I mean, and so that's one thing. A good marketing program around a game is sufficient. The other part is to play a game and say, I like this game except for, and focus on the except for. Then you have to do the branding and the other things for the launch. And a lot of times, just fixing. And in the writing business, you have editors. And when I write, I know exactly what I'm saying. But people who read my stuff think that I'm from China. And the editor takes that fresh view of my writing and turns it into something that's intelligible. You as a game designer can do the same thing for somebody else's game. I have never set out to design a terrible game, but I have. I'd say that about half of the games that I've done have been real stinkers. And the nice thing about stinkers is that nobody knows about them because they just kind of go away. So I'd be willing to bet that you've never heard of Nolan Bushnell's Pool Shark. I can tell you, Nolan Bushnell's Pool Shark was maybe one of the worst games ever created. But you didn't know that, did you? So editing is an important step. And I think that you should be willing to be unmercifully critical of other people's works, providing you can figure out a way to make them better. And that may be the difference between success and failure all by itself.
Recently, in the serious games class that I teach here, we had a discussion about the challenges that educational games face. And a lot of the typical challenges that games face.
That was nice. Sorry.
Sorry, I probably did that. Marketing, the gap between the administrators who have purchasing power and the teachers who want to use the technology, etc. One of my students, graduate student, kind of blew my mind when he said, well, the real thing that we're facing, the big challenge is actually the textbook lobby. And the traditional textbook industry has such a powerful lobby that educational games won't catch on until we catch up in that respect. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and maybe, is there a need for an educational software association in addition to the entertainment software association as an additional lobbying arm for educational games? Or do you think that it will catch up organically from the consumer end up?
Excellent and difficult question. The issue with politics, anything that's primarily politics, is it tends to lag society. Just because there's inertia, you're goring some oxes that have been favored by politicians and have their organizations in place. But there is a point, and I'd like to think of it as, have you ever had your car tires frozen into water, and you have to really give it a lot of gas to break your car free? Or there's stiction, but once you get all that power, and once you break free, it accelerates at an incredible pace. Hysteresis. I think that that's what's happening with educational software. All the data everywhere says that educational software, or particularly the bottom 4 rungs of Bloom's taxonomy, is significantly superior to a classroom. That it's when you get into deep understanding, deep learning, that the classroom shines. I believe that it is building momentum. Like right now, there's a huge market in the homeschooling for educational games. And now it's starting to get big in the private school marketplace. The public school marketplace are the ones where the lobbies get important, and along with teachers' unions. But the teachers are starting to embrace, and increasingly teachers have disposable funds. The problem a lot of times is the kids don't have tablets, they don't have Chromebooks, they don't have some of these other things. But I believe that we are at the dawn of true education reform using computer games, and that there will be some economics to it within the next 5 years. I predicted that it was going to happen 5 years ago, and I hope that it's not going to be one of those things where it always is 5 years ahead. But I really feel like there's some things happening in the last little while that is going to make educational software much more profitable as a game construct. Yeah.
Do you think that, considering your many comments about educational software, educational games, and as well as expanding the definition of what a game is. Do you feel that maybe with time that could help get rid of some of the stigma that some people consider what video gaming and a gamer is? Because I've sometimes seen that there tends to be like a negative connotation, at least with parts of the general public, with what a gamer is, or all that.
I think the opposite. I scorn people who don't play. You just have to shame people who aren't gamers, back at you. I think that stigmas always happen when there's a perception of excess. When I was growing up, people who read too many books were known as bad bookworms, and they were antisocial and ooh, it's bookworm. Would any of your parents dislike the fact that you read too many books now? I don't think so, So I think it's just a phase on life's way, and I wouldn't worry about it. Own it. I'm a gamer, and that makes me cooler than you are. I think that we all want to shame ourselves sometimes because we do, a lot of times we know we're playing games too much and it's a guilty pleasure. But, and so we're willing to believe that people who shame us, but I'm saying not.
Yeah. So, as an educational games developer, you mentioned it was mentioned that it's hard to get into the classrooms right now because textbooks have such control over that, and teachers have to adhere to a certain standard of what they're supposed to be teaching in class, and it's not getting that approved. So, as a developer, should there be emphasis on trying to get games into the classroom, or is it possibly a better path right now to focus on getting it to the parents?
Getting to the parents. Or making it cheap enough that the discretionary funds to the teachers. And understand that there's a lot of teachers that are starting to really climb into this world. And I didn't say it's going to be an easy path. But if I were you, I would focus on a couple of areas that are really deficient. Kids don't write enough. And so I believe that there are systems that help students learn how to write. And I put some focus there because, college students, a lot of college students, when I see what they write in social media, I say, boy, I'm really bad at grammar, but they're horrible. And writing is one of those ways that you can communicate. Anyway, yes?
My question would be, you talk a lot about how important marketing is to games, and I can't agree more. The question I have is, as a person who doesn't have a lot of funds, because I know marketing is one of the most expensive parts of any product pushing out, whether it be games.
Don't disagree.
Well, I guess my question would be,
money is a substitute for lack of imagination.
So then how, to finish my question, how do you see that working specifically? Talk a little bit about marketing on a low budget.
Just the value goes to the creative. The creative figures out how to market with no cost. Social media, tricks, cheats, weird things, running naked down the middle of the highway with the URL on your back. All of these things can be done very cheaply. But I think that there is a beauty to figuring out new, cheap tricks for every solution. And, well, yeah, money helps. But I think sometimes money is a blocker. I do a lot of speaking on entrepreneurship. And there are many people who are entrepreneurs. They want to be an entrepreneur. But oh my God, they can't be because they can't raise money. They use money as a blocker to their mind and their outcomes. Whereas anybody can create a job for themselves. That's the first step of entrepreneurship. In fact, when I have entrepreneurs come to me for venture capital or advice, I ask them, how many companies have you started? And I said, well, this is my first one. I said, well, have you ever just created a job for yourself? I said, well, no, I haven't done that. I said, then if you can't create a job for yourself, why do you think I should invest money in you? You haven't invested the time to create an enterprise. Don't be an entrepreneur by letting money block you. Move forward, figure out a way to do it, learn the skills. If you need marketing money, what are you using that money for? It's probably to pay somebody that has skills that you don't have. So, you're maybe being lazy because you can find those skills online and then you don't have to pay for them. Sweat equity. It's resilience. It's making things happen. And at the same time, you're learning stuff. You're increasing your toolbox of things that you can do. I mean, I love bumping up into a problem that I don't know anything about. And then all of a sudden, I have to climb down a rabbit hole and figure it out. Like, I decided I want to do kinetic art, and so that's what brought me back, and I'm doing Arduinos. And Raspberry Pis, and I'm getting a kick out of it. Now, could I have hired somebody to do all that for me? Absolutely. But now I know the nuance a little bit, and it's just a way of thinking about life that I think is better. I've got time for one more. Yeah.
So the free-to-play model of games, I'm sure you would agree, radically changed how we as game developers do business. And from your experiences, have you seen other models that experiment with new ways of, for lack of a better expression, using a magnet to pull money out of people's pockets?
Yeah. There's always new ones coming along. There was one that was tried in Europe where you actually paid people to download something. The problem with some of those is that there's always the wise guys that'll figure out a way to scam you. I think actually pay to download is starting to come back a little bit. I'd say that the last 2 or 3 games that I've downloaded, I've paid for because the word of mouth has been good and various things. And so I think everybody's kind of figuring out that free-to-play is kind of free, but not really. And I think that this, there's sort of this group mindset that's fuzzy and it's disparate. But I think that people change as a group. There's an old saw that says, if you want to lead a mob, figure out where it's going, and then get in front of it and say, follow me. They're not necessarily following you, but everybody will think they are, which is just good enough. Thank you very much. It's been great being here.